have delivered millions of courses to pilots in training, including myself up in Hood River, Oregon, a million years ago, learning how to fly. John and Martha became the first and only husband and wife to both hold every category and class of FAA pilot and instructor certificates. They fly their own Falcon 10 and wherever they go. And I think they arm wrestle or maybe do rock, paper, scissors to see who's going to get to fly. And they have flown at every continent of the world except Antarctica, and including a trip completely around the world via the length of Russia. Wowza. So they have been inducted into everything you can think of. As far as, well, most recently that I know of, and there might be one that I've missed, but Martha was inducted into the Women in Aviation Pioneer Hall of Fame. That was in 2023. And that was established to honor women who have made significant contributions as record setters, pioneers, innovators, all of those things which Martha is. And by the way, John, I think he might be the only male that was inducted into the Women in Aviation Hall of Fame. As I said, I think I got a little emotional there because John and Martha have been a touchstone in my life and in my flying career. And I bet if we could see all of the several hundred of you that are in the gallery, if you were to raise your hands, if you've watched John and Martha King's video, if you've used one of their courses, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I do appreciate the different hairstyles that Martha has had over the years. John's has kind of remained very similar over the years, so I don't know about that. But again, I wanted to introduce some icons, and John and Martha King, take it away.
Well, hello, fellow pilots. In case there's any confusion about this, I'm John King.
And I'm Martha King. And we are actually sitting down, not standing up, but it's hard to tell exactly what size people are when you're on the video screen. Let's see.
Martha's fiddling with the computer here. While she's doing that, I want to make some comments. First of all, Martha and I have a real passion for aviation. We've had virtually a lifetime in aviation. I noticed that Jolie said that we've been in business over 40 years. Actually, we've been in business over 50 years. And regarding my hairstyles, I've gone from normal to balding. So I'm actually in a balding hairstyle. And we knocked the microphone over there for a minute. I hope it sounds okay now. And we've always had a bit more aircraft than we could quite afford. We started out with this aircraft, which is a Cessna 340, and that's what we think we look like. But that's not what we look like. That's what we looked like 40 some years ago when we bought that Cessna 340.
1977 to be precise.
I see. And we had that 340, by the way, for 10 years, and we used it when we were teaching weekend ground schools. And what we would do is fly to some place that the pilots would meet us, and we'd teach ground school on Saturday and Sunday, and on Monday we'd give the written exam. So we get them their private pilot written exam accomplished in one weekend, and then we'd fly to another city in the Cessna 340. And we did 50 weekends a year that way, and we had that Cessna 340 as our means of transportation. And you know, if you have an airplane long enough, eventually you get a disease. And
that disease.
What was that disease, Martha?
Well, it's a very expensive disease. You begin to realize that the airplane doesn't smell right. You just have this enormous craving to smell jet fuel. And that is a very expensive disease. And so we lost our heads and we went out and we bought an old Citation 500. Now, people would ask us, well, what was it, a Citation 1 or 2? Well, we used to call it a Citation 0 because it was built before Cessna even started numbering the models that they were producing. But it was, it was one of the very earliest business jets ever built. And it was a fantastic airplane for us, a great step up. Cessna designed it that way from their piston twins into a jet.
But there was one major thing wrong with that airplane. Not only it was the first business jet, it was also the slowest business jet ever built.
And the people had all kinds of derogatory nicknames for it. They called it a slowtation. They called it a mutation. Air traffic controllers called it a frustration. Other people called it a crustation. It was so embarrassing. Oh, and by the way, if anyone on here remembers back in the day when Beechcraft used to run King Air ads that said, "We fly at near jet speeds," our Citation 500 was the near jet they were talking about. And in part, that's because they had a terrible bird strike problem. You know what that bird strike problem was?
Yes, I do, Martha.
Go
It
ahead.
got run down from the rear.
So we finally got fed up with all of those insults. And besides, no airplane you fly ever seems to fly far enough or high enough or fast enough.
So we went out after owning this Citation 500 for what, 10 years?
About 10 years.
About the same length of time we had the Cessna 340. And we went out and got this old Falcon 10. And this Falcon 10 is a swept wing jet. It's 150 knots faster than that old Citation was. And you can imagine the insurance company had grave misgivings about this mom and pop operation flying this hot jet. So they said, "Look, John, Martha, we want to make sure that you not only get type rated in this aircraft, we want to make sure that you take a full course of simulator training. It's 21 days, and we want to make sure you take that." And we did, and it was just about the hardest thing we ever did. I mean, we sweated bullets. And when we got done, we figured we must have done pretty well, because the instructor got us aside and says, "John, Martha, I've got wonderful news for you." And I said, "Well, that's fantastic. What's that?" He says, "Well, you'll never have to worry about a mid-air collision in this airplane." And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. Why not?" And he says, "You're so far behind this airplane, you won't even be involved." So we had to take all those jokes, and we in the Citation. Now we're taking jokes in the Falcon 10.
But, people tell John all the time that he's lucky that I'm willing to fly with him.
And I say, "Lucky? What are you talking about, lucky? She wants to be pilot in command half the time, and it costs twice as much, and she's got an opinion about everything."
But, John likes to think that our interactions,
Relationship.
thank you, represents or emphasizes that old saying that behind every successful man stands a great woman.
Well, you're right, Martha. That's exactly the way I feel about
Well,
it.
the problem is what he doesn't realize is the real saying is in front of every great woman stands some guy without a clue who's blocking her view.
Well, see, Martha and I have been married for 59 years. I've been putting up with this for 59 years.
But-
Go ahead.
Okay, well, let's talk about your winning strategy, and we suggest that you play with TNT. And what we're going to talk about this afternoon is the surprising correlation between entrepreneurship and safety.
Now, it's Martha and I obviously are passionate about flying. We're also passionate about entrepreneurship. And we've been in this business for 50 years. We went broke in our first business, and and now we're not broke. We like not broke a lot better, by the way. But history is full of entrepreneurs who had a passion about something and were able to change the world. Let me give you an example. One example is the Steve Jobs,
Right.
who invented the cell phone. Now, there are 8 billion people in the world, and there are 7 billion cell phones. And Martha and I can testify to that. When we flew around the world, we went to, let's see, with Scandinavia,
Right, to Norway.
Norway.
Well, you may be thinking about the trip where we went from Scotland down to Morocco.
That's it. I'm thinking Scotland down to Morocco. And we had what they called handlers. We had people who would show up and help us do the paperwork leaving. And then another handler on the other end would meet us and help us do the paperwork arriving. And handlers would arrange people to give us tours and take care of us everything in the new local country. So when the handler arrived in Scotland, he had a cell phone. And when the handler met us in Morocco, he had a cell phone. And the only difference was the ringtone. In Scotland, the cell phone played Scotland the Brave. And in Morocco, it played Call to Prayer. I mean, they were just identical. And these guys are holding these cell phones on both ends. And we began to realize the whole world has cell phones. If you think it's annoying, people are walking around looking at their cell phone on the sidewalk. It's happening from 7 billion people. It's all over the world. And Steve Jobs is an entrepreneur who changed the world. He had a passion about something, and he was able to change the world. We have a friend who coaches entrepreneurs, and he says, if you want to become a billionaire, do something that affects 1 billion people. And so if you can do something that changes the world to 7 billion people, you're likely to become a billionaire. And that's what Steve Jobs is. So you have an opportunity. You live in a time and place where you can use your passion for aviation to start, run, and grow a profitable aviation business. And having been broke and not broke, Martha and I are kind of passionate about helping people get started in aviation as a business. And that's what we would like you to do. We would like you to know about the opportunity and be able to take advantage of the opportunity. And that's what we're talking about today.
Because entrepreneurship, whether you actually start your own business or whether you're active as an employee in someone else's, the entrepreneurial mindset allows you to improve your life and make a positive influence on the aviation community and every community that you interact with. So what does entrepreneurship have to do with safety? Well, a profitable business generates cash. And with cash, you can create a product or service that you can sell profitably. And the key there is profitable. And we're going to talk about that some more. Being profitable makes any aviation business safer because safety costs money. And a business must be profitable in order to afford good risk management. An unprofitable business.
By the way, we know what we're talking about when we talk about an unprofitable business. Remember, we went broke in our first business.
Absolutely bankrupt. An unprofitable business will be short on cash. Now, some expenses have to be kept current in order to keep the doors open. Wages have to be paid, aircraft fuel and leases have to be paid, utilities, rent. But risk management programs, when you're short on cash, are often deferred. They go into the category, if you will, of important but not urgent, which is not really true. They are urgent. So how do you create a profitable business? Well, we're going to be talking about tips and lessons from our book, Lift, how to start, run, and grow your own successful business, about how we went from broke to not broke, and what we think we learned along the way that we hope will help you, whether you go in or are in business for yourself or just apply it in your company.
So what we're going to talk about is your winning strategy. And we say your winning strategy, not tragedy, strategy is to play with TNT. We want you to get ahead with it in life and everything you do with an entrepreneurial mindset. Whether you're an entrepreneur or employed by someone else, the entrepreneurial mindset is going to make you successful. So let's talk about how you do that. First of all, the word play.
Well, I want to draw a comparison before we go on to that, which is that as we've gone along in our business career and our aviation career, one of the things that we've realized is that risk management is very applicable, not just to flying, but also to business. And there's so many lessons that cross over from that. So what we're going to talk about here this afternoon are, first of all, the most important consideration for success in life. And secondly, the dynamite tool that gets results from other people every single time.
Now, as we've said, we've been broke. We know a lot about being broke, and we've been not broke. And we like not broke a lot better. So when we got not broke, our first business we got broke in was a lubrication service and a servicing business for cars and trucks. And we didn't really have any passion for that at all. And so when things got tough in that business, we began to wish we weren't in the business. We didn't like the business.
We were in that business because it was basically a business John's family had been in, and it was handy and we knew about it. So
we were in that business because we thought we could make money. And so our goal was to make money. And so this time around, we said, wow, that hurt. Let's not do that anymore. Let's do something for the fun of it until a serious business comes along. So we've been teaching ground schools now for over 50 years, and we're still looking for a serious business.
Never have found one yet. So what we did after we went broke is we started teaching 2-day weekend ground schools. And in the beginning, what we basically said was, we were swinging for the fences in this first business, and we went bankrupt. That hurt. So let's just do something for the fun of it until a serious business comes along.
So we designed this business so that we would have a good time. We wanted to travel around and teach classrooms full of pilots. And when we had these, we rented classrooms and motel rooms, basically meeting rooms. And I would teach private commercial and flight instructor in one classroom, and Martha would teach instrument and instrument flight instructor in another classroom. And by the way, when Martha and I got married, we decided we were going to be equal partners in everything we would do. And it's been 59 years that we've been married, and I'm still struggling to be Martha's equal partner. I want to make it clear right now. I say this a lot. She's only a little bit better pilot than I am. And the reason I say this a lot, it's not really true, but because she's actually a lot better pilot than I am. We'll talk about that. She's a better risk manager than I am. She's ahead of the airplane and ahead of me all the time. So it makes a better job of risk management because we know what's coming in ahead. But anyway, we decided to build a business that we would enjoy doing. So the idea of flying around and teaching ground schools was our idea of a fun business, and we're still doing it.
When we learned to fly, which was in 1969, they didn't have the 2-day ground schools, and it was a bit of a struggle for us to find the right resources to do our ground school. The flight instructors then, like today, would rather be flying than sitting on the ground doing ground school for people, and they weren't specialized in all the latest regs up and so on, changes. So it was a niche that we found that we felt we could make a definite contribution for. So we had found a contribution that others were going to reward us for, and we did that live for 10 years before we got into the video.
You know, sometimes people come into King Schools and they see the video studio and they see the building and they look around and they say, wow, you've got a terrific business here. Believe it or not, that annoys us when people say that. And the reason that annoys us is that you can't see a business. A business is not buildings, it's not people, it's not video studios. A business is the identification of a customer need or want that people will pay you for, and that you can fill that need or want profitably. And so successful people have habits that help them find a contribution that people will pay them to do. And so they have habits to do that, and those habits are PLAY, play. and that is they have a passion. And so we have a passion for aviation. So we know a lot about aviation because anything that comes along to read about aviation, we read it. We're very interested in aviation. And L stands for lots of interest. And A stands for they're always learning. And those habits, yet again, stands for Y stands for yet again. And what that is it circles back because these are habits. So having passion, lots of interest, and always learning as a habit is your key for helping find things that people will pay you for. And everything that you know more about than other people, we call a Scrabble letter.
So life, we say, is like a game of Scrabble. And in the board game of Scrabble, you get 7-letter tiles with various values, and you draw those tiles blindly from a pile, and you try to make high-value words in order to win the game. That's the board game. But what about Scrabble letters in life? Well, as John said, every area of knowledge or passion for you where you know more than other people is a Scrabble letter that can be very useful to you. So in the Scrabble game of life, if you will, you can have as many letters as you want. You're not limited to just 7. And remember, each of those letters is an area of knowledge that you have. And also, you get to choose what those letters will be. You don't have to accept whatever you blindly pull from a pile. You get to pick those so that you can create and enjoy what you want to. So
as we said, these letters will be helpful to these rules, these habits will be helpful to you as an entrepreneur, but they'll be helpful to you no matter what you do.
And so what do you do with those Scrabble letters? Well, they're a resource to you as an entrepreneur and a member of the aviation community. So you accumulate those Scrabble letters, those areas of passion and knowledge, and then combine them in different ways to form words, if you will, that become contributions to the community. For instance, let's give you an example based on our story, our Scrabble letters. Our first Scrabble letter was aviation. Aviation was an absolute passion for us, but the passion by itself didn't really do anything for us, but it was a letter. It was our first letter. So our second letter is teaching. We found out that we enjoyed teaching a lot, and we started out teaching very small ground school classes. We would teach at local FBOs by putting up posters, because that's all we could afford to do after the bankruptcy. And we'd teach 4 people. A really great class might have 7 people in it. And that's all we were able to do. But we were starting to get a word with the aviation and the teaching.
Because we could do something we could actually make money at, and that is teaching aviation. So putting those 2 Scrabble letters together, let us start making money.
Right. And then we learned to become good in direct mail. We went to some conferences, read a lot of books, and because we were doing good direct mail programs, we were able to have large ground school classes, like 110 people in Billings, Montana, the first time we went. And that third letter really made a high value word, if you will, that made us actually a business rather than just a nice job.
So we went from being able to teach 7 people, say, at a time to over 100 people at a time. That's that third Scrabble letter we got. We got a passion, and we learned to become good students of direct mail.
Then our next Scrabble letter was video. And video, we first used it to help as far as teaching our own classes were concerned. And then a friend said that you should sell these courses on video.
And I said, well, that just goes to show you don't know one darn thing about our business, because it won't work on video. And the reason we thought it won't work on video is that we felt that the great success we were having really happy students who were passing their knowledge test every time. We thought that success had to do with our personal dynamic presence, because we had learned through 10 years of teaching ground schools how to get into a subject, how to explain a subject, and that related to what we had said before and made it work together. And we learned how to use humor when it helped people remember and understand things. We learned how to make up things to help people remember it. And we used all of those things and they were working well. And we thought another key to it, we thought, frankly, our personal presence was a Scrabble letter. We thought we had to have that to be successful at it. But the guy says, well, I don't know how you can say that if you haven't tried it, meaning that video would work or wouldn't work is what I was saying. And so we tried it and it worked. And
What we had then was we had a product, we could put ourselves in boxes and ship ourselves out, if you will, so that our reach was much more than just basically west of the Mississippi. And we had reach all over the country
well,
and
all over the world.
international,
Yeah.
all over the world. That's
So
correct.
that was our fourth Scrabble letter. And
As part of the video, we learned to use a blue screen. Now, people nowadays use a green screen generally, but just like the weatherman does, there's nothing behind you, but you're looking at a monitor off the side that shows you what you're pointing at and superimposes you on top of it.
this is called chroma key. And what it does is it tells the system, look, everywhere you see blue, I want you to replace it with video from another source. But everywhere you see some color other than blue, I want you to keep it. So but basically what that meant is the system replaced everything you see in blue with video from another source and kept us and put us in front of it. And we were able to show sectional charts. We were able to do a good job of explaining.
Animations or graphics that we created, we could play running video, anything like that. And we could be standing there pointing at things to emphasize what it was that we were talking about.
So they call this chroma key, and this chroma key was essentially another Scrabble letter for us.
And there's John, and back in the day, early days, in front of a sectional chart, pointing out the information about an airport and how you interpret that information. So we now had video. And we started out, some people on here may still remember VHS tapes. We started out with VHS and then moved into the computer. And computerized learning made everything much easier for learners because they could take small segments. We divided the program up into 7 to 10 minutes of video followed by the questions. And it made it much easier to learn and remember the information.
It kept track of what they were doing and showed them where they were.
And
It served up questions, FAA style questions that they would take just as soon as they covered a subject. And so it really did a good job for them.
And then as the internet came along, we moved to internet course delivery, which made the learning mobile because they could take it even on a tablet and therefore even easier for the customers. And then in addition to internet course delivery, we started doing internet marketing, which made buying much easier for people no matter where they were in the world. So those are our Scrabble letters. And you can see that with just one or two, we had a good job, but we didn't really have a business. And as we added each one of those letters, if you will, it expanded in its capability to do more, be more rewarding for us, and to give more value to our students.
But every Scrabble letter, every area of knowledge that we learned a lot about became a Scrabble letter, and we could put them together, and they made us, they made our business multiply.
So all of that ended up eventually with our being this year 50 years in business, and with us moving up from the Citation to the Falcon in 2001. And we've thought a lot about why we went from abject failure in that oil and lubrication business to success in King schools and the basically just fancy ground instructors. And in our opinion, the difference is having fun and having passion. We have always enjoyed aviation passionately. One of the reasons perhaps that we went broke in our first business is that we spent more of our time out flying than we spent really running the business. And that's what we were really fascinated by.
So
But-
it doesn't seem like we had a lot of Scrabble letters, but it took decades to get every one of these. We had to learn them and be able to use them and apply them. But if you take a penny and you double that penny 30 times, if you start with a penny and double and double and double, it doesn't take many times. If you do it 30 times, you have over $5 million. And that's the principle of the Scrabble letters. Each time the Scrabble letter would come along, it would really double our business. And it kept doubling and doubling, and pretty soon we're eating regularly, and we're not broke anymore.
So as we developed our business, we developed some principles of interacting with our customers and our employees and suppliers. Go ahead.
Now, we've said this talk is about play with TNT. Play is passion, lots of interest, always learning, and yet again. And the TNT, the first letter of TNT is trust. In order to get anything done with people, they need to trust you. So TNT is a dynamite habit that'll help you be rewarded for your contribution. So you trust someone who has your interest, or you believe has your interest at heart, who respects you, is predictable, and plays by fair rules. So what we want to do, and what we've tried hard to do, is to demonstrate that we're trustworthy, because that's the first letter of TNT. If you want to get anything done with somebody, you've got to be seen as trustworthy, and it pays to actually be trustworthy. Now, the N is need. And basically what you need to do is seek to understand other people's needs rather than be understood. And what we're all thinking about, you're sitting here thinking, what's in this for me? And we call that the WIFM. You've got to understand the what's in it for me for other people. That's called the WIFM as far as we're concerned. So when you think in terms of what's in it for them, you're thinking in terms of taking care of their need. And that's how you get results through. As an entrepreneur, there are at least 3 groups of people that you need to take care of their needs all the time. You need to take care of the needs of your customers, because otherwise, if you don't take care of their needs, why would they pay you money? You need to take care of your fellow workers. We have some fellow workers who have worked with us for over 40 years. If you think about that, virtually every waking day of their lives is with our company, and it's been that way for 40 years. They've devoted their lives to us. So we need to be thinking about their needs and how we can take care of them. And then it's counterintuitive that you have to take care of the needs of vendors, but if you do, it'll be good for them and it'll be good for you. We had a printer one time who was printing our brochures when we were doing the direct mail. And we were keeping him busy all the time, sending out these direct mail pieces, and he printed them for us. And he had a fire, and the fire set them back tremendously. So Martha and I promised them we would keep doing business with them. And then we went down there and we paid for the next 6 months of mailers in advance. And that let him get his printing company all back up and going again. And how it was the fastest way he could get going again. And he remembered that and appreciated that for the rest of his life, I can tell you. And from then on in, he
prioritized our business and
Right.
made sure that even if we tried to be very, very good customers, but if we had an issue where we had to get something done unexpectedly in a hurry, he was always helpful and made sure that we got it done.
And finally, the last T in TNT is triumph with a solution to their needs. You triumph with a solution to their needs. And so TNT is trust, needs, and triumph with a solution. And by thinking on an orientation towards TNT all the time, thinking about other people all the time, including your workers, your customers, your vendors, then you'll get results through other people, and you'll make things happen. And that's what an entrepreneur does. So,
and John has talked before about what a business is, that it's not the buildings, employees, and equipment, but it's that identification of a customer need or want that you can fulfill profitably. And in order to do that, you have to be thinking about who is your customer, what do they want, how can you help them? And helping them is what will make you successful and your business successful.
We do something that's counterintuitive, is if we're writing a letter to somebody or an email, we make sure that the first word in that communication is the word you. And we've been writing emails and letters to some people for years, and they weren't aware that we were doing that. They just knew that they liked receiving our emails, they liked receiving our letters because they were all about them. So if you're going to start a letter to someone and the first word in it has to be you spend some time thinking about their needs. You spend some time thinking about what are they thinking about? What are they interested in? And that focuses your attention on them and forces you to think about them. So, we do that internally in our own company, and we do that when we write people's letters to people. And if you've got a letter from King Schools, take a look at it. Particularly if it's from John and Martha, take a look at it and see what the first word in it is. And very often it surprises people because they don't realize that it's written about them. Now, it's a little awkward to do that because most people don't do that, and you have to kind of rearrange your sentence to get it started thinking about them.
But I'll tell you what else you have to do. You have to slap down Microsoft Word and slap down Outlook, because they can't imagine starting a letter or an email with you, and we have to correct the autocorrect or the auto error, if you will, where it keeps changing that on us, and we have to go back and fix it.
Another thing about being we call it a you-centered organization, is we try and provide customers an outstanding customer experience. We used to talk about customer service, and we quit talking about customer service. Customer service is just one element of the entire customer experience. We're interested in creating an outstanding customer experience, the whole thing. And
so to tie this back into the safety issue, if you are a successful, profitable organization, whether you work in it or you own it, that can result in promoting aviation safety, because your success will give you the cash to run the business well and to work on the things that are important but not necessarily considered urgent, such as the risk management that in aviation particularly is so critical to having not just a successful business, but one with a positive impact on your community.
If you have this risk management orientation, it'll show up in your marketing, and your very marketing, which you would think of as self-serving, will promote aviation safety.
Now, we said at the beginning that we had, first of all, let me say there's some goals that we would like to suggest that you develop and have for yourself. And the first goal is to identify and follow your passion. You know, it's not the destination that matters, it's the journey to get there. And if you can figure out what your primary passion is, whether it's aviation or something else, and figure out a way to follow that, you'll not only be more successful, but you'll be more fulfilled, and you'll just have more fun on your journey through life.
The second thing we suggest is that you have a habit of learning deeply, because that's play. And it's passion, lots of interest, always learning, and yet again, and you make that a habit, it'll work in your favor because you'll develop Scrabble letters that you can use that'll help double your business as you go along.
And think about and develop at least one way you can use TNT in the area of your passion to really reinforce what you're doing and have a stronger relationship with your customers, your fellow employees, your vendors, whoever you're working with.
Now, we thought we were going to make, and I don't really know. We did know 2 tall promises to you. The first promise we make is the most important consideration in getting ahead as an entrepreneur or as an employee, just getting
As a
ahead in
person.
life as a person, right? So the single most important consideration in getting ahead won't surprise you. It's play. It's passion, lots of interest, always learning, and yet again.
And the
Okay.
second promise was to talk about the dynamite tool that gets results from people every single time. And as you know by now, that's TNT, trust, need, and triumph with a solution.
So remember, to get ahead in life, you need to make a great contribution. As I said, we have a friend, his name is Peter Diamandis. He says to become a billionaire, you need to make life better for a billion people. So play Scrabble with TNT, and you'll see how play leads to success.
And if you want to check out more about our philosophy, check out our book at kingschools.com/lift-book. Because we took this talk right out of that book, and we hope it's useful to you.
So we made all this up, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Because we make stuff up all the time, like Black Square, you're there. We make that stuff up. All right, folks.
I have an announcement to make before we get much further, and that is the winner of our door prize, which is a course of their choice. I think that's the ground school course and the check ride course with it, goes to a new Cal Pilot member who I believe is a student pilot, Di Tran, if I pronounce that properly, Di Tran, and congratulations to you, and have a lot of fun in your training. And we are open for questions. I think, Jolie, you're the one handling the questions, if any, correct?
I am. I also wanted to let you know that we have a precise flight pulse oximeter that was awarded with your seminar as well, and that is Dawn Lundell. And so both with, I don't know if it's Day or Die, I'm sorry. We will be in contact with you about getting your course of choice that goes everything from student pilot up to MEI. And with Dawn, we will contact you about the pulse oximeter. And yes, John and Martha, you have a question. What did you learn from your first failed business?
Well, the first thing and the most powerful thing we think we learned, well, John, as John talked about, have a passion. But as we looked back over it, what we said to ourselves was, failure is wasted if you don't take responsibility for it. If you do something that didn't work, it's not productive to say, and we could have said, well, there was an oil embargo and that's why we went out of business.
We went broke during the middle of the OPEC oil embargo.
Correct.
But whose fault was that? It was our fault.
Because of the way we designed the business, when the economy got stressed, it wasn't able to survive. But that was because we were young and we didn't design it properly. So whether it's a recession, other companies doing something or other, if you always blame somebody else for why it didn't work out, you don't move forward. You don't have something that enlightens you. So failure.
I like to think we're still young and foolish.
Well, failure is wasted if you don't take responsibility for it. You want to add anything to
Well,
that?
you've already said it. Have a passion. If times get tough and you don't have a passion for what you're doing, you don't want to continue. But if you have a passion for it, you'll work harder, you'll work longer, and you'll pursue through difficulty.
Right.
I think that's a really good point. And probably a lot of people don't know that I'm a licensed psychotherapist. So for 33 years now, I've been providing counseling to individuals, couples, groups, etc., corporations when they need a little consultation. And rarely is it during a great time in our life that we learn about ourselves. It's always the hard time in life that we get through, that we recognize that we learned it was growing pains. And I think that perseverance and the ability to be flexible with your thinking are so important. And with what you've given us today about your business and your commitment to the pilot population and your customers, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful, addition to
Well,
that we will.
becomes a joy to pursue in difficulty when you have a passion about the business. I'm
Okay,
sorry I interrupted you, Julie.
no, no, you did not interrupt me at all. I wanted to give you another question from the
Okay.
peanut gallery. How did you get started in aviation?
Okay. Well, that's a
John
long
got-
story.
John got started before I did.
My dad owned an Aranca Champion. Aranca Champion was a chromoly tube and fabric airplane. And I just thought, he took me for a ride and I thought, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm going to do this. And I was like 3 years old at that time. And as soon as I was old enough to solo at the age of 16, I did. And I soloed at 16 and I wanted to go to college. And I did this solo at the age of 16 and I wanted to save up money for college. And I thought, this flying is outrageous. It was costing me $8 an hour. And
Airplane and instructor.
right, including the airplane and instructor. And I thought, well, I can't afford this. So I quit flying and went to college. And then as soon as Martha and I got married and we sold a business and I said, I want to use this opportunity. We're not in the business anymore and we got some money. I want to buy an airplane and start flying. So we started flying together. And once again, our deal was we're going to be equal partners in everything we would do. And so she's not going to let me stay at home while
I'm not gonna stay.
She's not going to stay at home while I'm learning to fly. So we went out and learned to fly together, and we've done every category and class together as we worked along. We've done them maybe one on one day and another on the other day, and then the next day, and we've just pursued that passion together. And as I say, she's only a little bit better than I am. So
The airplane we bought to learn to fly was a Cherokee 140. And it was a great airplane for the learning, and we flew it coast to coast a couple of times, including when we came out after we got our certificates. We came out to California to visit a friend and decided we wanted to move out here, and flew the airplane around California and decided that San Diego was the place, and we're still here.
yeah, one other thing is we scared people when we first started flying because they thought we had no fear whatsoever. And
They were right.
and they were right. And we have this talk that we gave last year, straight talk about aviation safety. Many of the things that people tell beginning pilots about safety are almost offensive. It's like you're not smart enough to be safe, sort of thing. And we think that people can do a better job of promoting safety than our community is now. We think we can learn a lot.
Differently than the community was when we were learning to fly. And so, as John said, we scared some people. We were smart enough to recognize that if we were going to be doing much flying coast to coast, we had still a lot of relatives on the East Coast after we moved out, that we needed to get it an instrument rating, and we got the instrument rating we did the check ride like the day after we hit the back then there was a certain minimum number of hours. I think
You
it
had
was
to have
200
yeah.
that you had to have before you could go for your instrument rating. And I'm very pleased that they've gotten rid of that, because if you really want to travel with an airplane, you really need to be instrument equipped to be able to cope with what the weather does to you, that because forecasts, while good, are not perfect by any
And you
means.
need to be instrument raters,
Right.
of course, too.
So I have another question. What is on your upcoming flight plans for the rest of 2024 and 2025?
In life, we're at King Schools. One of the things we're going to do is do the equivalent for A&P mechanics that we have done with pilots, and follow them all the way through and help them become A&Ps. Our community shortage of A&Ps is just as serious as is our shortage of pilots. And so it's an urgent thing to keep airplanes maintained and operating, we need to get more aviation mechanics. And so we're going to work on that. That's our mission for the next year or so.
And our next approaching bucket list item is we're going to, in January, go with our CEO, Barry, whom you know, of course, Jolie, and the three of us are going to get type rated in a CJ3, Citation Jet 3. We're looking forward to that, just as something fun and different to do, and it's a very popular airplane, so it's going to be fun.
Another fun thing we're going to be looking forward to is what is it, January, we're going to go on a cruise that will
November.
November, a cruise that will be a seminar and for flight schools and colleges and universities.
As part of our 50th anniversary year, we have a symposium that we're doing for flight schools and universities with speakers coming in, and it's a cruise out of Fort Lauderdale down to Mexico and back, and the days at sea are going to be full of aviation seminars and aviation trivia games and stuff like that. So that's co-sponsored with Cessna, so that's going to be a lot of fun.
That is fabulous. And I have one last question for you, and it's a tough one. How can we better teach judgment to new pilots and instructors?
Well, first of all, I would say don't call it judgment. I would call it tools. If you learn to scuba dive, they don't say to you, we're going to teach you good scuba judgment. What they say to you is, this is an unforgiving environment, as aviation is, and here are the tools we want you to use to plan your dives, to figure out whether you're capable of doing a particular kind of dive, and if you do, what precautions you need to take before and during the dive. So approach it with people as, here are some tools. You've got tools to manage the activity, whether you're rock climbing or scuba diving or skiing or whatever you're doing in other aspects of life. And these are just tools for this specific activity, aviation, that will be useful to you and help your passengers have be more comfortable, because they won't be scared and fly with you more.
And let me follow up a little bit on what Martha said. Part of our feeling about talking about judgment is that if you tell someone they don't have judgment, it gives them no guidance. It's just, get judgment. How do I get judgment? I don't know. But if I talk about, here are some habits that you can have that will help you identify and mitigate the risks of flight. And if you have these, and here's the tools that go along with those habits, and we talk about PAVE and CARE.
It's the same idea as when you use a checklist to pre-flight the airplane or for various phases of flight. You've got these tools, PAVE, CARE, and so on, as checklist items to evaluate the risk and mitigate the risk. Our focus is on, don't talk about it as if it's a go, no-go decision and they have to have good judgment to be able to make the decision. Talk about it as if it's a mitigation task, and here's some tools to help you evaluate where on the mitigation scale you could be and whether you need to scratch the trip or not.
One of the reasons I say that Martha is a better pilot than I am is she starts thinking about a flight that we're going to do 2 or 3 days in advance. And on the day before the flight, she'll have already figured out the takeoff weight, the speed for takeoff, the speed for climb, and the landing weight at the other end, and how much fuel we're going to have, and how much fuel we've used, and how much runway we're going to require, and what speed will be required on the approach. And she'll have the runway, the weather figured out, and she does this in advance. And so having a habit of being proactive rather than reactive is a great aviation habit. And so you think in advance about what are the risks and how am I going to mitigate them, and rather than getting in the air and trying to figure out what you're going to do when you're in the situation. So that's another habit. You become proactive, and it's, as I say, it's not judgment. It's habits that'll help you stay out of trouble.
You can say that you want people that you're teaching to have a habit of using these tools so they never get surprised in the air. Being surprised in an airplane is never a good thing. And we've had multiple times where we haven't usually scrubbed the trip, but we have changed to a different airport that we're going into because the wind and runway combination just don't make sense in terms of the crosswind's too strong, the temperature's too high with a shorter runway than we want, so we'll go to a different airport where it'll either be cooler or the runway will be longer, so that and the day of the flight is not the day to be figuring this out, because by then you're basically, you don't have the opportunity to make smart decisions about modifying the circumstances.
One of the reasons we are reluctant to talk about go, no go, we want people to think about, well, how can I go a safer way? How could I go with less risk? And so you can adjust the trip. You can adjust a lot of things and sidestep the risks that might concern you. And so-
Because if you talk go, no go, in part, you're working against human nature, which is I planned this trip and I'm invested in it, and I've got maybe people going with me, and they're really reluctant to give it up, particularly if you've got some strong reason to get to that other end. So don't think go, no go as much as modify, how to modify, different airplane, another pilot, fuel
Different
stop,
route.
different route, fuel stop, all those kinds of things.
And the, it's, we're getting carried away here, but.
You pulled our string on this one.
Right,
Laura.
What was I going to say?
I don't know.
All right. Well, but basically what I wanted to say is that we are all hardwired to accomplish what we set out to do. That's how you became a pilot, because you are an achiever, and achievement, or that achievement orientation can be a risk factor in an airplane, because we all hate to give up on a goal, because that's how we became pilots. And so one of the things we have to do is realize that we as pilots are a risk factor in the airplane, and our lack of willingness to give up on a goal is a risk factor as well.
Yes, I think that's a great point. And I mentioned it last year, but I'm going to mention it again, that I used, well, I've used King courses for all my ratings, but
I'm so sorry.
I used it most recently for my commercial in 2020, when everybody was, hunkered up and such. I
Right.
was able to get my commercial, and I followed the practical segment that you did, Martha, up at, with a DP from
Merit
Right,
shoe,
shoot.
right, the
it's from the
DPE.
Northwest. And in watch, I love the way that Martha thinks. And I think that's that you have the ability to be flexible with your thinking, and that for humans is very difficult. We like to think in habitual ways. But I created this whole notebook for my DPE about the flight that he gave me up in the Northwest, transporting some firefighters up to an active fire. And when he looked at it and I went over it with him, he said, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen anything so comprehensive." And I said, "Well, I listened to everything that Martha King said, and then I did it and had a notebook this thick." But I just, as somebody that really enjoys your educational style, the way that you're self-effacing, the way that you make it a safe environment for people to ask questions, to question their assumptions. On behalf of all of us that are watching, we just want to thank you for the 50 years.
Well,
So I
thank
had to
you.
update my notes because I had over 40, which definitely 50 is.
That's
But we wanted to
fantastic.
thank you so much, John and Martha, for giving us a wonderful keynote. today.
Well, thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
It's a privilege to be talking with everybody here today.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we're going to take oh, there we go. We are going to take just a few minutes and we're going to announce, we'll introduce Mike Jesh, who will be speaking in just a couple of minutes. If there are any questions that anybody who's watching has about your wings credit, about your California Pilots Association membership status, please just put it in the chat. We are monitoring it at all times. And we would appreciate any questions that you have for any of our board members or for any of the regions that we represent. So we'll
So
just get,
Lee,
yes.
it's Carol. There's a question from Bicus for John and Martha, or did they? I hope they didn't leave. Any thoughts on new technologies ahead, electric airplanes for GA, etc.?
Okay, John and Martha, I don't know if you heard that, but if you have any impressions or ideas about our new technologies, including our electric aircraft.
It's okay. They may have left.
Yeah, I see
We'll
them.
save it for next year.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Can you
There we
hear
go.
us? Okay,
Yes.
we're trying to get going back here again.
Okay.
We think we did.
Technology and new aircraft.
Every
and so on.
technology has its own risks and its own opportunities. And there's a lot to work out on these unmanned aerial vehicles, or what do we call it? The future of
UAM,
UAM,
urban air mobility.
urban air mobility, with a lot to work out, including their acceptance in neighborhoods and flying over people's houses and those kinds of things. The FAA is working very hard to advance that, but there's a lot of risks to be managed, and they're working on it.
Of course, on the other hand, you know, when the Wright brothers first flew, everybody was saying, "Oh, it's not practical. You can't fly more than you know, a few hundred yards. Can't carry passengers. Blah 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 blah." For some people, and the UAM, urban air mobility, is in the same category, but it didn't take very long before the Wright brothers airplanes developed into something that was actually usable, and they flew in 1903, and it was 1927, which was only 24 years later, that Lindbergh flew solo across the North Atlantic from New York to Paris. So when innovation really gets going, it can go at an amazing speed. And particularly these days with all of the design and computational capacity of computers and the internet and so on, advances in technology can happen a lot faster than we think they're going to.
It's another exciting dimension of aviation.
The one I'm looking for is when we get supersonic business jets.
She's wanting to fly one, isn't she?
Yeah, that's what you're wanting. You know, it was interesting because I don't know if you knew this, at Oshkosh, they had the electric float plane
Yes.
over at the seaplane base, and then they wanted to get it to the show. And because of the limitations of how much range you have to have and the amount of energy it takes to get a seaplane onto the plane and taking off, that they actually had to put it on a truck for you know, the 10-minute drive. But you know, the
Right.
technology is advancing and it's so exciting.
They're going from battery driven when they can to hydrogen powered.
Hydrogen fuel cells.
Hydrogen fuel cells will create electricity.
Right.
Yes.
But there are a lot of reasons to try and get to the urban air mobility model if they can, just from emissions and from a noise standpoint. in order to make air transportation more acceptable to people who are not enmeshed in and passionate about aviation themselves, so that we quit losing the airports and the infrastructure for our aviation community and system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate your time. I love how you both look fabulous in that color. I remember trying on that shirt, one of those shirts, and it was like not in my palette, but you guys. So thank you
All
again.
right, see you
And
later.
Okay.
everybody can give a round of applause.
everybody.